I finally launched my Water People Connection project. It's all about water and the people who inhabit floodplains or wetlands, or city people who have lost the connection to their water. When I speak about water, I mean fresh water, lakes, rivers, and also the water that you have everywhere in the city. Right here I am in Hanover, and it's full of little rivers, of lakes, and I see people strolling around, and they like to be on the side of the water, and they are surely able to appreciate, but how connected are we really to our water? I think much of the connection has been lost just because we live in such an urban environment. But many people around the world are still in a strong and very close connection to the water. They are depending. They are not used that water just comes out of a tap and you can even drink it. So I'm exploring all this, and before starting to get into details with people I saw around the world, I have started with myself. What is my connection with water? How comes I'm so interested in water and in people? And the answer is pretty easy. I was born in a big floodplain, although today it's all not floodplain anymore. And I grew up in a city that is called Between the Rivers, and I studied floodplain ecology for all my life. It was the theme of my PhD thesis and the subject of my research for almost 3 decades now. So I'm really connected to water on a scientific basis, but I try to understand the cultural significance of water and of people culture linked to rivers, river culture. But before I do this, I tell you a bit about my background so that you believe me that I can tell you some interesting things that are not just stories, but it's really a lifetime work. In my Water People project, I analyze, not very scientifically, but really with stories, the cultural identity of rivers and their people. And as a first step, I tell you about myself, then I tell you about people I met in my lifetime and their stories related to water. And if you want to look all this up, you find it under the handle Water People Stories in Instagram and also on Facebook. And it's all about connecting. I have connected to the people and to the water and to this project. And without this dedication, it wouldn't work out. I was born in the Po Valley in the north of Italy. And that's a place that used to be really full of water, so full that people have been draining the landscape for 2,000 years. The city of my birth is near Venice, and I grew up in Milan, the city that is called Between Rivers. And that's all something where you can still see the sign of water, but it's really difficult to have open water surfaces somewhere in the cities. It's a bit nicer once you go up north. Then I moved to Germany, and that's where I studied biology and tropical ecology. And my dream was to go to the Amazon, and I was able to do it. I went down the whole of the Amazon in 1988. The first time I went to the Amazon was actually 86. And so I spent a whole year traveling around the Amazon and other South American countries in 88 and 89. I spent a whole year in what was the world's second largest hydroelectric plant with an immense artificial lake, the Lago de Guri, Embalse de Guri in Venezuela. And that was in 1990 and 1991. And then I came back to Europe to finish my thesis, my diploma, and I was sent off to the Amazon for several years with a paid contract. That was just paradise. I spent many years living in Manaus in the Amazon, and it must have been something like 4 or 5 years that I was there. And then almost 20 years that I came back every year, and I traveled to really, really remote places. And I have been living with the fishermen in their houses, in their floating houses, in their stilt houses, sleeping in hammocks, eating rice and fish. That's what you eat there, and beans and a bit of salad. It's a really very simple but very rich life. And I was really immersed into this culture, into this wonderful place with people who are really linked to the water, because they live in the water, they feed from everything that comes from the water. So I couldn't think of a better place to start my project about people who are linked to water and their relationship and their culture. I was a lecturer in Manaus and in Nice and in several other unis, and I still kept my connection to water all the time, and my heart beats for floodplains and wetlands. And wherever I traveled, and that was pretty much, I traveled to so many countries all around the world for conferences, for everything that a scientist has to do. And I loved to spend some time in those countries, and I always visited the wetlands, and I even took my kids along, so they know pretty many really remote places with water and trees standing in the water and people living there. And I'm very happy that I was able to show this to my kids while they were still small. During all the travels, I wrote a diary, and so I have a lot of notes about the encounters, about interviews, about things I observed, people who told me things, and so I have quite an insight, and I go back in time reading my diaries and remembering things, and that's what this project is about. How are people connected to wetlands all over the world, and how did this change? Because I have been studying wetlands for almost 3 decades now, and there has been quite some change in the life. I mean, imagine that when I started, there was no electricity, no cell phones, no internet, so it was really remote. I was just out of the world, and that felt good. But it was a different world. Today, people have their cell phones, have electricity, and life has changed in so many ways. And then besides, obviously, there is climatic changes. There are a lot of changes that you can measure, that you can see. And my PhD thesis at the time was about photosynthetic activities of trees and floodplains. And these data are serving today as basis, along with thousands of other people's data, to make the climate change models that we rely upon today. But this video is not about scientific data, it's about people and their relationship to water. It's about how people connect to their rivers and to their environment and to the water that comes from somewhere and goes to somewhere. And it's really interesting to observe how people are able to make use of water even when there is none available. And the strategies they found and the resilience they have. So that's an interesting part of my interviews, where I focus upon how do people live in places where water is not available, or where there are really strong changes like floods or droughts. And that's the focus of this project, disruption and resilience. My friend and colleague from the University of Tours in France, Matthias Wanzen, he invited me to participate in his book from the UNESCO about river culture. And that's an interesting book that is available for free as a PDF. I can send it to you if you write me. And that's a lot of insight into river culture all around the world from different scientists and artists. So this is just the introduction, and I will go on posting stories of people and their connection to water in the next time, in Instagram and in Facebook and on YouTube. So I'm happy if you want to follow me and follow the stories and tell me your story.